My name is Bear Saragusa, and this is the Hunting Hound podcast presented by W Hunting Supply.
All right. Brian Phillips.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Bear?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for coming on. I was excited about this one. I was a bunch of reasons I was excited about this. I wanted to talk to you about beagles, absolutely. And I was also excited that you could do it on a weekend where most of these I end up doing after people are done working on a weeknight, which would be fine if I lived in the States, but being over here, it's about a 7-hour time difference from where you're at right now, or I guess about 6 from where you're at. But some of these Midwest guys, it gets brutally late. So I'm excited about this. The sun's still up. It's great.
Yeah, I bet I had to Google that to see the timing on it. So
yeah,
I'm glad it worked
out.
No,
it worked. This works out fantastically. So yeah, let's jump right in. You are a beagle man from your toes to the top of your head.
Right. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad
absolutely.
to talk beagles, all the time. Try to be as big of an ambassador as we can. We like the little hounds. So
yeah,
I guess I've been doing it I'm 36. So I think I got my first beagle when I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Was it something that your family had done up into that previously, or was it something you picked up just totally on your own?
Totally on my own, not from a hunting family. In high school, had some friends that we did small game hunting with. So, and it wasn't with dogs. It was just with, walking the woods, kicking brush, stuff like that.
Right.
Right.
Cool.
But when I got in college, I wanted a dog, and I like kind of the animal husbandry side of things. Breeding and producing something that has a purpose. And was trying to settle between a short hair and a beagle. And here in Pennsylvania, we don't have much of a wild bird population.
Yeah.
So a lady at work hooked me up with a breeder and I had some beagle puppies. So that's how I got my first dog.
That's excellent. Sorry, this guy was running around on the floor making a bunch of noise. I've got, for the people who can't see, I had to pick Mike the beagle pup up off the floor because he was making too much background noise. So we'll see if this works. Stop it. But that's really interesting. So you had the beagles through college.
Right. I lived at home and I'd commuted to college, and I worked night shifts. So it kind of worked out. Like I did college part-time for a little bit and then full-time, throughout getting my degree. But I had a lot of time during the day.
Okay. Yep. And what is your degree in?
Business marketing, but I ended up in finance accounting. So
okay. Yeah.
I've been in that for about 20 years. So
gotcha. It's a lot. That's an unusual thing. Staying in the dogs throughout college.
Right.
Because I did the same thing. I got into dogs when I'm 36 as well, and I got into dogs when I was 10, the sled dogs, and I brought the team with me to college.
Oh wow!
I had about 6 months where I didn't have them with me, and was commuting back and forth about 2.5 hours, or not that much. I guess about 2 hours if I sped a little bit.
Okay.
To get home to run them, and it was wearing me out between classes and that. It was just I was losing steam, so I ended up bringing them with me to college and brought those same dogs with me to Norway when I moved. So
wow.
That's it's an unusual thing. A lot of the guys I talk to, they get to the point where they want to sow their wild oats a little bit, and take a break from the hounds.
Right. It definitely, not that I was in trouble, but it definitely kept me away from any type of trouble, because on many nights I knew I needed to be up to beat the heat at like 5 a.m. So I was in bed by 10. I didn't stay out.
That's right. It's it keeps you on the straight and narrow. I know they say that about kids, but definitely worked for me too, because I didn't have I didn't have the time, the money. I didn't have any reason to be going out on the town.
Right.
The gals that were out at the bars drinking were not necessarily the gals I was interested in. So
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So when you got into it, did you get right into it like full blast with a couple of them, or did you start with one? Walk me a little bit through how you got into like the process of getting into the beagles for you.
Okay, I started that first one. It was just kind of on a whim, zero research, zero anything. Didn't know bloodlines, didn't know registries, anything like that. So I got what we call a grade dog. I mean, she was full blood beagle out of hunting stock. She was not AKC registered. I run all AKC dogs
Okay.
now. But I was really green, right? I didn't know what to expect. So I remember we had a little bit of a swamp in our backyard that was kind of nice for running dogs. And, I just took that puppy on walks, kicking brush piles. And honestly, I was so green, I didn't know I thought it was all sight chasing. So, that's how much thought I put into it. And I'll never forget the day when, she's probably 5-6 months old. And then we saw that, kicked the brush pile, and rabbit shot out. And she chased it, but then at the end of chasing it, she dropped her nose and gave some voice. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have the best dog in the world. I didn't even know they could do this. You know what I mean? But
right, that's awesome.
Yeah. So,
what made you choose beagles over some of these other breeds? Like what versus a coonhound or something like that?
Really, it didn't even. The coonhounds weren't even on my radar. Sure. But the bird dogs were, just. Reading in Field and Stream and stuff like that. And
sure. Yeah.
The beagle. Yeah. Right. So the beagle just was happenstance with the lady at work, who introduced me to them. So,
okay.
And it really lined up with PA covers. So we have a ton of game lands, state lands in PA. So you can make a rabbit dog off a wild game, like you can get them on plenty of rabbits. Whereas the bird,
you don't need to go to the pens and stuff, right? Yeah.
Right. You and I am a member of like Carlisle Beagle Club, and that's good for pups and getting started and in training. But like we have a limited grouse population up north. It involved traveling for the bird dogs and stuff like that. Now, fast forward 15 years, I have a bird dog too. Of course. But,
oh, cool. What do you have? What kind of bird dog do you have?
A field bred Springer.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Spanish. Flushing dog, and I got her because it's a lot of the same cover that I rabbit hunt with. It's brushy blocks, so that she tears the brush up, and it's a good crossover, change of pace type stuff.
Do you ever run them together, like have her flush and the beagles take over?
Oh yeah. So, I do most of my running just pleasure running. I'm not carrying a gun or anything, but I start many a pups by holding those pups and sending her in the brush piles and keeping their head focused on a lane. And she'll even give a little yip. The bird dog will, when it's the track's hot enough. So kind of got a little warning. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's excellent. What, when you first so your first pup, did you get just the one pup from that litter, or did that first grade female?
Yeah, that was the first pup that I got from that litter. It was the only pup I got from that litter. And of course,
how long was it until you got the second, like until you started to build your own kennel?
She was, so to speak. I probably introduced the next dog. It was about 6 months later, so it didn't take long.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was a pup, so it took a little longer for her. It was probably 10, 11 months before she was running with a brace mate. But at that time, I had to put a little more thought into it. And, I'm like once I go all in on something, I have to do all the research. And I was looking at pedigrees that I didn't know what dogs were in that pedigree. But, just the internet's pretty powerful. And I ended up settling on a young female out of a national champion. It was a grandsire to that national champion. Went down to West Virginia, brought her home. And that's probably what really set the hook with the capabilities of what a beagle could really do. Now that grade dog was great. She had a different set of tools. But the style of this dog that I call her name was Daisy. And we had her till she was 12. She started at 4 months old, circling her own rabbit.
Sure.
She had really good line control, proper use of mouth, jump dog. She checked a lot of boxes. She wasn't the fastest dog, but she definitely accounted for her game, and that's kind of the standard or what I've built a blueprint of the dog that I'm kind of looking for, off of her.
Sure. Yeah. And those dogs, I think everybody, when they're in it long enough, has that dog where it just becomes the blueprint for everything you're going for. I had a dog like that named Blomon.
Okay.
Was a lead dog that I got him when he was old, and I got him because he wasn't running really that well for the people who had him. And it just ended up being just a respect thing for him, that he didn't really feel like he needed to run. And then I got him, and we just clicked totally, and it just showed me what a good dog had the potential to be. And once that happens, you're not really willing to settle for anything less.
Right.
It sounds like Daisy was that kind of dog for you.
For sure, right? So she kind of turns into that measuring stick, and we've introduced dogs, after that, and all of them have their good qualities. Daisy wasn't a front end dog, but she'd love to run the slot, and if once those dogs ran a little over, she had the brains just on a dime. We call it snapping necks. All the other dogs are trying to hark back to the line because she's off going. She'll get to the front, but it's not by pushing.
Right.
It was
doing the work. Yeah.
Staying on the line. Yeah.
Cool.
Right.
I love dogs like that. Oh man.
Yeah.
Did you base some of your future breedings off of Daisy? Was she a dog that you bred to after?
I tried, and being young and in the early years of my breeding career, or my beagling, world getting started, I started breeding her too late. So I didn't have her first litter till she was about 4 or 5. And we got solid dogs out of her. We didn't get she didn't produce better than what she was, though. And that could have been a number of reasons. Could have been the sire I selected. She was kind of a little bit of an outcross on both sides. So maybe that played into it. There was a female out of Daisy that there's some dogs running around that have finished out of that dog. So the producing gene was there, but I probably should have hang on to one or two, but being so new and young in the game, I was kind of ignorant to, that at the time.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. So what does your kennel look like now? Like as you move forward from that Daisy dog, where did you go from there, and where did it take you ultimately?
Really led me to I joined the Carlisle Beagle Club, and it's there's tons of Beagle clubs in the United States, and then specifically in Pennsylvania, we have clubs. I think there's everywhere. 50, maybe 100 clubs, right?
Yeah.
And like, for example, a Beagle Club, I don't know if for the audience, some are in the wild. All of them are based on wild game, but we have pens. We have a 40-acre pen and a 20-acre pen, and we have field trials in those pens and everything. And it's all wild game, so we try to stimulate as much of a natural experience as possible. But a lot of met a lot of mentors there, and one of my mentors got me onto some of his bloodline.
Yep. And
so I kind of based a lot of my kennel off of his lines that he has. So
go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. It's Donald Dobbs. He has Chop Tank Kennels, and he's been had a successful line of dogs for several years, focusing on a couple different strains, which actually kind of tie into some of Daisy's bloodlines that I had, bits and pieces through outcrosses that he's done. So I've really based a lot of it on those kennels. And then another one of my mentors, Mark Malloy, brought some dogs from down south they go back to Black Creek breeding. And so we have kind of a mix of those bloodlines in our kennels today. I primarily run females.
I was going to ask about that. A lot of people, in fact, most of the people I've talked to so far have said that.
Okay.
That they prefer.
And it's just
females.
easier.
It is easier.
Because you don't have to worry about as much of heat cycles and things like that with males being around. If you're trialing, we have 4 classes. Right. So you have 13-inch females, 15-inch females, and same for the males. So if you're driving the whole way to a trial, it's nice to have them all in one class, and it's on the same day. And
sure. What are you running? Are you running 15 or 13?
I have a mix of 13 and 15, so I'm trying to get size into my dogs right now.
Okay, you're trying to get them to be a little bigger.
Right. Just I think they hold up a little better. I can show. There'll be examples of some that one-offs that are 13-inch that have just as much stamina. But I think on average, what I see, and I think just even from a breeding perspective, I had a C-section a couple years ago on a smaller female. I think
Sure.
I think that's kind of what I'm working towards.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's I find that kind of thing so hard to predict. Especially like with the huskies and with the hounds I've had, where I've seen some big females really struggle when it was time to pup, and then
Okay.
like this beagle pup I've got now, his mom is maybe 11 inches, maybe,
Okay.
and she had 10 without
Wow.
any problems. Like they
See,
didn't even need formula. It's just like it's
that's
impossible.
good.
It's impossible to gauge. I mean, the male she was bred to is a really nice male, but is closer to 15. Much bigger than she was. So I was like a
Okay.
little bit nervous, especially when we took the pictures, because I work at the vet hospital where we took the X-rays to see how many pups she had. And when we got that total number, it was like, ooh, I hope this works out. And she did amazing.
Wow, that's great. I've have friends recently here. Full 15-inch female needed a C-section. Or then I've had friends that you have the 11-incher that has no problem. So
Yeah,
right.
it's a hard thing to predict for sure. So, but I want to talk to you a little bit about this trialing, because that's something that we don't do a lot of here,
Okay.
and certainly not in the way that you guys do it over there, where you may have multiple dogs on the ground at the same time. Here in a trial situation, they will only do, at this point, they'll only do single dogs to my knowledge. I'll put a little bit of a qualifier in there, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Because there's some hare trials here, and then there's some roe deer trials here, so you can get what's called like the hunting champion status or certificate, where my understanding of it is that you start with a total number of points, and then every mistake that your dog makes, you get points subtracted from it. I've never been to one of those. I've been to a couple of fox trials before with foxhounds, but never a beagle trial. So I'm really interested in how you guys do it over there. It sounds like you've done quite a bit of that. Can you walk me through what is a trial? How does it work? How is it done? How many dogs are you on the ground? Some of these videos I see, it seems like there's 100 dogs streaming by. It's like,
Yeah. Right.
it's hard to see.
Yeah, I can speak. I run primarily AKC, American Kennel Club trials, license trials. And there's the format we run in is small pack option. So our packs can range anywhere from 4 to 9 dogs in a winner's pack. So if you have a class of 15 13-inch females, that's 15 dogs. You might run first series, you would split them up in 3 packs of 5, and then go from there. The judges would evaluate them in those packs, and it's not points based or anything like that. We go off a rule book and published by the American Kennel Club and put together by kind of like the forefathers of, and it's tried to stimulate hunting situations. So I think the basis is the dogs are to run with the intent to overtake their game, but it's subjective in that you need to have control and accountability as well. So you don't want a dog that's constantly we're losing contact with the line, or excessive mouth, running off game of deer, for example. So there is several scenarios that go into it.
Right. That's interesting. How does the point system work in a trial like that?
So the trial itself, there's no point system. It's just 2 judges that go out with the packs, and then they would pick, if there's that first series, is they would choose the top dogs out of each pack. And in that case, they would either come back with a second series where they would roll out, another additional packs depending on the amount of dogs they bring back. So the winner's pack, what you're ultimately trying to get to, has to be 9 dogs or less. So if they have 7 dogs left out of that first series, they would come back with a winner's pack of 7 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to the field with that. And
Sure.
And that's where you're just slowly eliminating dogs as you work through that winner's pack. So you could run it down to you could run it down to a brace if you wanted to find the top dog. Some trials end like that, some don't. Some will end with 4 or 5 dogs on the ground, and it's the first through fifth are placing hounds. Actually, it's first through fourth get actual points, then for their AKC title. Then the fifth hound is your MBQ or next best qualifier that makes the bench. And if you, in the AKC format, to become a field champion, you need to have 3 wins and 120 points. So if that first place dog that won, it's a class of 15, that dog gets 15 points towards its title. If it's second place, you just, divide by 2, third place, divide by 3, and so on.
Sure. Yep.
That's the small pack option format. Now the large pack format, probably what you probably saw, where they release many hounds at once. I think they just cast them all at once, but I don't know enough to speak on their behalf. But that's that we refer to as the large pack format in the AKC.
Right.
And then there's the brace format as well, which we dabble in that a little bit, but they'll run braces or trios. So if you have those, if you have 16 dogs, they run 8 braces of 2, and then just work their way through the dogs like that.
Sure. Yep. No, that makes sense. Wow. How often? I mean, that's if that's going to be a lot of trials to get the dog that sort of champion status.
Well, it depends on entries. Right? So, for example, we finished our first field champion last year.
Yep.
Her name's Sadie, and she won a class of 50 at one weekend. So that helped a lot.
Sure.
So you get a win like that, that'll really help to get you there. But if you have small entries, you could be chasing some trials for a couple years to get a dog finished. It's not an easy feat to finish a dog, either. You have, there's a lot of scenarios and environmental things and everything that goes into effect there.
Right. Is the emphasis in trials like that, is the emphasis on speed, or is the emphasis on like the Daisy dog you were talking about, I guess it was the gray dog you were talking?
So Daisy was
the gray dog, the one that was really, really solid on the line.
Yeah, so that's where it's kind of subjective, and you have to go watch a lot of dogs run, and you have to get familiar with what judges are looking for, what type of dog.
Yeah.
But what I've learned, I've judged a lot of trials, and I think I just judged a trial on Friday, and the one thing I've learned being a judge is, it changes by the day. Conditions play a bit in it, but basically, there's more than one way to run a rabbit.
Sure. So I mean, that's why I was asking. Yeah. It's such a, it's so fascinating talking to different houndsmen. Just even just the people that I tend to run with. We've got kind of four or five guys that will occasionally get together and run fox, and we all. I don't think we would pay $1 for each other's dogs. Like, bottom line, like, what I'm looking for is totally different from what they're looking for. And, we all get the job done to a degree, but it's just going to be a totally different animal, that each of us is looking for. And that's got to be really, and that makes it really complicated when, you kind of almost can see by the time you've shown up and see who's going to be the judge. It's like, okay, well, this is not going to go my way just because who's judging. That's got to be tough.
Right. And I have, I'm friends with, and I have mentors that have completely different views than myself, and both of them can circle a rabbit. It's just how you want to do it. And, but primarily, we're all looking for a dog that can, like, it gets back to that run with the intent to overtake game, but with basically you want it, I don't know, we want it to run as fast as it can when it can, but walk it when it has to,
Sure.
And it's, conditions based here in the summer. It's hot. We don't have as many trials just due to that. But a 70-degree day versus a 30-degree day,
Right.
it's going to change.
Yeah, it's going to have a big effect on the field. Sure.
Right. And there's days where scent's so high, like my Daisy dog, she'd sit on the back of the pack and wouldn't get enough done, because she's going to be that cut dog, and she's a beatable type dog. But then there's days where you'd have to really grind, and that's where she won a few trials that way.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. I love stuff like that. The sort of nuances to the whole thing is really fascinating to me.
Yeah. I really try. It's easy to get focused on a style, but I try to step back from that now. And I kind of respect, the different aspects of, a dog's qualities. And, sure. There's more than one way to get it done within reason. You still have to have, like myself, I enjoy running a pack on the weekends, and they all have to be a similar type speed, at least, to just for continuity.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. That makes all kinds of sense. How many do you have at this point?
I have 5 running dogs, and I have 2 pups right now.
Okay.
And they're all kind of a difference.
Sure. When you go to a trial, are you trying to get all of them out, as many out as you can, or is it kind of a one dog per trial type of a deal?
Yeah, it depends on your situation. Like right now, I could probably handle 1 to 2 dogs right now, just to give them the right time that they need. So, like, different guys and girls have different methods, but like we do a lot of soloing to really make a dog run right for us. So you want that dog kind of as independent as possible.
Sure.
But it has to, run with the pack. But when it comes to a check, and I don't know, are you familiar with, like, some people, I guess I hear in the coon dog world, they call it a loss or something like that. But we call it check, when they overrun the line, they come back, we call that, their check work. They really tighten up by soloing them. So that's where like the training aspect comes in. What dog needs what. So if I have a real hard going dog, it's nice where I'd have another dog in the kennel that's kind of like Daisy that would sit on the back and cut them. So that'll tighten them up. They'll get smart if they have brains. They'll learn that, they'll figure that dog out, and that's how you can kind of tweak a dog. And that's what's fun about trialing, is just getting the potential out of them.
Right. Yeah, it sounds really interesting. It's not something I've ever considered doing until I got this Mike dog. And I've got a lot of hurdles that I need to get past before I even consider entering him in anything, because part of what I'm going to struggle with, I think, again, I'm kind of comparing this to other hounds that I've had, but is, we have a lot of hair here.
Okay.
But the hair, they're not gonna go into the blowdowns. They're not gonna go into the piles of brushes. It's harder to localize them than it is if I went down to Sweden and ran, cottontails. So I'm a little bit curious how that's gonna be, getting him started on something like hair without an already started dog to kind of get him moving in the right direction. I'm a little curious about that. With the foxes, it's pretty easy because you can just put out bait and then start from a bait site where that they're there. And the hares, it's a little bit of a different deal. Which it's a puzzle I haven't quite cracked yet. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do that. Yeah,
that's interesting because I've never ran a hare. However, we have hair in northern PA, but the season doesn't line up with the accounting schedule that I've lived on, with year end, because it's right around Christmas, New Year's. But I keep saying, and my son's getting a little older. He's about 13 now, and one of these years, we're going to make a trip up to Maine. A lot of my friends go up to Maine for a week for hair camp, and the dogs cross over. They do it every year, and they adjust pretty quickly over to the hair.
Yeah, for sure. That's where I'm from.
Right. Yeah. I thought I remember that.
Born and raised there. Where do they tend to, like, if you're going somewhere in Maine, where should you go?
I don't know specifically around towns, but it's the timberlands that they go on that are, I guess, there's clear cuts, and it's a lot of sounds like the same cover they're using for grouse too.
Yep.
There's some crossover there between the hare and the grouse cover. So
There's a bunch. The hare and the ruffed grouse. It's not uncommon to see them in the same places.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as starting dogs, Bear, like I personally, a lot of us, we don't take them out with an older dog, at least to start. Like I just walked pups. I finally got one pup started last night. She was 8 months old. She's from our last litter. We kept 2 females. She's out of that Sadie dog that we finished last year. And, we're fortunate. I can let them go in the backyard if I see a rabbit sitting out.
Sure.
And I've probably gave these puppies between my son and I, and we probably gave them 30 sleigh chases, and they just, you put them down and they just want to run circles and jump up your leg, and it's just like one of these days that light bulb's going to click. So last night took them down to the club right before dusk, and we have a good population of rabbits in there, and took 6 or 7 rabbits. And for some reason that light bulb clicked, and, off she went.
That's awesome. That's so gratifying when that light bulb moment, that aha moment with those pups is just, that's the best thing about it. One of the best things about running, working with dogs is just that moment where they're like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing.
Right. It never gets old, right?
It never gets old. It really doesn't. But if you were in my shoes, how would you approach, how would you approach starting a beagle if you ended up here, with just running the hares? There's no pens here. I mean, there's no, there's no beagling clubs. There's no place that I can go that I'm aware of. I haven't found it yet, put it that way. Where I can go and get them started in a pen where I know that there's hare within, a few hundred, yards of me. Because like where I am now, I know vaguely where I'm going to be able to find them. Based on the tracks during the winter time, and I've kind of been trying to keep track of it. But at the same time, I never see them. It's one of those things where they're there. It's just I never see them.
Okay.
Right.
I would just get them in the woods. I'm sure you're probably already doing that. But I've started my last litter. We started last year. They started on their second rabbit, first time out. And it was I have video of it was just kind of crazy. Like that was a one-off, but that was just, we have 12 acres here at our house, and I have paths cut through it. Mm-hmm. So they get used to the woods, like a lot, getting them used to the woods at a young age. So that helps get that play out of them. Sure. And it helps like that. Those pups last night, I played with them in the yard out here for about an hour or two to get that play out of them. And then I took them to the, out to get them on some rabbits. And then they were more focused at that point. So that focus is a big, big part of it, especially when they're younger. Sure. And I never get in a hurry anymore to get them started, because I've had them start at 4 or 5 months old, and that dog that starts at 9, 10 months old is just as good or better. To me, I don't see a correlation there. It's more on the bloodline and things like that.
Sure.
Those are precursors to how they're going to turn out.
Absolutely. I that's something that's always been really interesting to me in the dog world, is that, I have experienced the same, that I have seen no correlation between when the dog started and how good it eventually became. My 2 best dogs ever, the one didn't start leading until he was 4.
Okay.
He was a good sled dog. I mean, he was a good team dog, but didn't do the work in lead until he was about 4. And, the other one that was right up there was, leading before he was a year old,
Wow.
And, it's the same with the hounds. I've had, Vidpi wasn't started when I got her. My American Foxhound wasn't started when I got her. And she was a year and a half at that point. And, I had no real issues getting her started. There were some issues that I needed to overcome to get to the point where I could starting her. But once I'd gotten there, it was not hard to get her rolling.
Yep.
And then this Buzz dog was, he was, gosh, how old was he? It doesn't really matter. I'm sure he was 8 or 9 months old before he fully got rolling. And then the plot dog Dan, he was 5 months old. not even 4 months old when he started rolling. So, it's my attitude has always been to get him out into the woods as much as possible, which is, I'm already doing that with this Mike, this beagle pup. Just he's a teeny tiny little guy and short legs and still tripping over his own ears and things like that. But, it's just being out there, learning how to, getting used to birds and grouse flying up around him, and, the sound of waters crossing little streams, splashing around in puddles,
Right.
getting stung in the nose by bees and things like that. It's just stuff that he's not going to need to learn later on.
Right. And even driving too, get them used to riding in the truck or in the box is a big thing, because a lot of dogs will get car sick, and then it's an hour before they settle. But when you get to the to your hunting spot or your training spot, they come out of the box a little slow. So
Yeah.
Or dehydrate, you don't want to dehydrate him either, because a lot of droolers, things like
Right.
that. So
Oh, exactly.
I do try to get him. I feed them, like I work from home a lot, so I'll feed them in my truck on it. They give them treats when they get in the box on my lunch break and stuff like that. Just try to make it a happy spot for them.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I've been doing quite a bit of driving with Mike because I'm headed to a big wild hunting show, like wild game hunting show type of deal over in Sweden next weekend, and I knew I was going to need to bring him with me.
Okay.
So I've been working on getting him ready for that. Well, kind of a 4 or 5 hour car ride. I think he'll do okay at this point. He's hasn't gotten car sick so far. He does a little bit of screaming the first 5 minutes, but then he settles down pretty quick, thankfully.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're there are so many similarities in how I would start pretty much any dog, regardless of what its ultimate task was going to be. And a lot of that is just exposing them to the conditions, exposing them to the, some of the scenarios that they may meet in a hunting situation or a racing situation or a herding situation, but just sort of disguising these life lessons as play as much as I can.
Right. I had some crossover with bringing the bird dog on, so, I kind of set my ways on the hounds for a while there. And then getting that bird dog pup, I was completely green. I had no idea what I was doing. So I always joked I wanted the dog that knew its name. So I got a bird dog. So at least come when called,
Yeah, I get that. What made you get a bird dog, apart from the fact that you could teach it its name?
Yeah. So just running the dogs in the evenings there in the game lands here, and I'm in just west of Harrisburg, but they have a pretty good woodcock migration come through.
Sure.
And I thought, well, that's wild game that I could get that dog on. And that, went on for a couple years, and it was pretty steady population, and, kind of set the hook there to get, I always wanted one. It was just a time thing. So
cool. Yeah.
I thought it was about the right time to do it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. How has the sort of the corona, the pandemic, how has that affected your ability to finish dogs? Have there been less trials during the pandemic, or has it just kind of been something that's continued?
It definitely slowed down trialing. They're starting to pick back up now. A lot of the entry taking and everything's done outside as opposed to in clubhouses, just to try to make it as clean and safe as possible. So that has transitions things outside.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice for me. I was sent home 2 years ago to work from home instead of going into the office every day. So that saved me about an hour or two of driving a day, which correlated to that much more time, for the dogs. And
right. Yeah.
The farm here, we have a small dairy goat farm.
Okay.
That we run. So, right.
That's excellent. I was in goats for a little while. What breed of goats are you working with?
Yeah, my wife and I, we have Nubians, mini Nubians, and Nigerian dwarfs. So we kind of do the three mixes. My wife has a goat milk soap and lotion business, and then we do on the farm kind of agritourism stuff as well.
Cool. Yeah.
So my daughter and my son, and we're all involved in that. It's worked out pretty well, especially through COVID here. Everybody wants to do something outside. And that's kind of been a blessing for us as
Sure.
far as the timing of it. A bad situation, but
Right,
definitely
but
helped kickstart stuff there.
you got to make the best of a bad situation. It's good that you guys were able to do that. Yeah,
Right.
that's really interesting. What you say you get quite a few rabbits running through your yard. What, like, describe to me a little bit of the terrain that you live in. I'm a little bit familiar with Pennsylvania, but not huge. Not really.
Yeah, so it's a little hilly. We're kind of at the off the side of the Appalachians, but
Hmm.
it's a lot of woodlots. Like I would explain, like the game lands that I run at a good bit. We have 10,000 acres 5 minutes from my house, and probably 300 or 400 acres of that is what we call rabbitat. It's
Yep.
that field edges. I love to hunt and work the dog on edges, because rabbits will use that as a natural barrier coming in and out. So
Okay. Yep.
we hunt a lot of woodlot. I call them woodlots. It's like little blocks between fields, and that's kind of the areas that we focus on.
Sure.
As far as hunting with the dogs. We do there's a ton of big timber, here,
Hmm.
where the rabbits, they don't, stick to those areas as much. But in the spring here with the bucks, the buck rabbits running big, you'll get we call them wood running rabbits, and it's fun. They'll go out 600 yards on that circle and come back almost like a hare.
Cool.
We had one of them this morning. It worked out pretty good.
That's cool. Yeah, I like stuff like that. I like. I don't know. The big hound person in me likes the animals that go big. That go wide. I like that. It's what I'm a little bit interested to see is that here a lot of people run these small European deer, like the roe deer, with beagles.
Okay.
Which has worked out pretty well for the deer. We're not able to run them with anything that's over 16 inches at the shoulder, and that's based just purely on the speed and the pressure that dog's going to be able to put on that animal, the deer. So the beagles are not an unusual breed to use for these roe deer, and I'm considering what I want to start Mike on, whether I want to start him on the hare or whether I want to start him on the roe deer, because we have a lot of roe deer here, and they're a lot easier to find than the hare, and I can get that sort of the equivalent of a field champion status on him.
Okay.
Either through hare or through the roe deer.
Okay. So there's people that do both, like they'll run the same hound on hare or roe deer, or
I imagine that there must be people who do both.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's most of the people I've talked to so far have not done both. They've done the one thing or the other thing. They've the people who run them on roe deer tend to also run them on red deer if they've got access to it, which are the big red stags, the European kind of elk looking things.
Okay.
And I don't know anybody off the top of my head that has done. Hush. Dude, pull it together, man. Who has gotten the championship status with both hare and roe deer? I'm sure there's somebody who has, but I don't know of that person. But I would be really interested to talk to that person, because that's a mighty versatile dog.
Right.
Is it allowed to run deer there in Pennsylvania with beagles or with anything? No,
we can't run deer. No, with hounds and PA. So
I don't think there's many states left where you can.
Right. I mean, they would be some of the southern states, I believe.
Would be it. Potentially Tennessee, maybe. I feel like potentially.
Okay.
Might still allow it, but that could be inaccurate.
Yeah, I know in the deep south, I think there's some, but and for some reason, I've had a little bit of trouble with dogs running deer, through the years, but I know some of it's in the bloodline, but I think a lot of it's just in the opportunity. They're on so many rabbits that they just get like that one track mind, to where we really don't have many deer runners, right now. Now I'll probably run a deer tonight, but
right.
Yeah,
now that you've said it.
But I also think, having the goats here on the farm, they're part of that caprine family. I don't know if they
Sure.
get
Yeah.
desensitized or something,
That
but they
could
don't.
definitely be. Yeah. That would be really
Right.
interesting. That would be a really interesting thing to find out. I would be really
Yeah.
every houndsman on earth would get a couple of goats if that ended up being the case.
Yeah, we can help
Oh
maintain the
man.
property and the hounds.
Oh, it's true. Because yeah, I mean, I had there might be something to that, man. Because I had pack goats, and both of my hounds were more or less roe deer clean, just from the get go, and it wasn't a lack of opportunity. It's just they weren't interested.
Okay.
And I wonder if it was just based off of the training of getting them to leave the goats alone. It could be. I mean,
Right.
I never thought about it, but
Right.
it's an interesting theory.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Now, a roe deer, how does it pattern when it's being ran? Is it like a hare will run big circles, right?
Hmm.
That's from what I hear. But like the roe deer, is that more like a straight line, and you're
Yeah.
trying to cut it off?
Well, the red deer, they'll just get out of dodge.
Okay.
They'll just pick a direction and they'll go. The roe deer are different. I actually, and it's pure. It's like I said when I was talking to Clint Buckwalter. It's inexperience on my part, but sometimes I can't tell the difference between a hare and a roe deer when they're running it. Like I need to go in and look to see what they're running because the hares will do these big loops um, without a lot of with maybe a little bit more zigzagging than the roe deer will do, but the roe deer will do the big loops as well, and it's
Okay.
about the same. Like the difference in size, they overlap each other enough so that I'm not able to distinguish it right off the bat. When I look at it on the Garmin, for example, I'm not able to
Okay.
say like right away that this is definitely a hare. Oh, this is definitely a roe deer. Um, and I'm sure that there are these little nuances that would tell somebody with much more experience than I have that they take one look at the Garmin and be like, oh, I know what this is, but I'm not there yet. They're similar enough so that I'm not able to figure it out. But it's the roe deer. What's interesting about the roe deer is that they're such small deer. They really are very small. They're not. They're about the same size as like the blacktails over in Alaska or the Coues deer down way down south, or those what are those little deer in
The Maryland, the Sikas,
yeah,
or
Sika deers. That's
I
right.
don't know if I'm saying that right, but
Yep, you're right. You're on the right track. That's right. They're about that size. They're going to be a real big one's going to be 100 pounds maybe. They're not real big. But they're incredibly fast. But especially with a dog that makes quite a bit of noise as it's chasing them. If you drop a Spitz, like some of these dogs that they use for moose hunting, that stays fairly quiet until it's baying up a moose. The roe deer, once those dogs sort of arrive on the scene, the roe deer will just bust out of there at full speed as fast as they can because they don't know where they've got the dog. But with like a hound, something that's going to open up on the trail, they'll stay a few hundred yards ahead of it, but then just kind of not going any faster than they need to, just kind of puttering along. And especially with some of these real short-legged dogs like the Bassets or the Dachshunds, um, you'll have deer doing big circles at you know, a slow jog or even a walk. With the Beagles are a little bit faster than the Dachshunds, obviously, and they're going to be moving a little bit faster. But it does seem like as long as they feel confident that they know where that dog is, they're not going to expend more energy than they feel like they need to. But the times where I've seen the times where I've bumped roe deer with uh, one of these Spitz dogs, the Norwegian elk hounds or something like that, they're out of there as fast as they possibly can move. So it's an interesting animal to run. And I think that maybe that is the difference um, between the hare and the roe deer when
okay.
is just how that race is going to start. Because the hare will, a lot of times they will tend to kind of hunker down and hope that the dog just doesn't see them, doesn't find them.
Right.
Whereas the roe deer are not going to take that chance. They're not going to stand still and let the dog get in real close. They're going to, so you can hear a little bit of a difference in the start there. That you don't have that with a hare. You've got that explosive, like sudden scream, and then they're off. It's full blast. A roe deer can be a little bit of a slow burn getting it going. Yeah. But
now with hare, I'm not as familiar, but do they come out? Like we start a lot of pups like at dusk, walking them at night.
Yep.
Because that's when the rabbits are out. Is
Yep.
that the same with hare, that you would find them more like a nocturnal type?
Yeah, it's like when I see them, it's in the evenings.
Yeah.
Oddly more in the evenings than in the mornings. I don't know if that's consistent with other people's experiences. That's just sort of an observation of mine, is that when I've seen them, it's been in the evening. But I'm sure, and that is something that I've noticed, because I'm out really early with the fox dogs, and I'll see foxes frequently, but won't see the hares. But in the evenings, I will. I wonder if that's consistent everywhere, whether it's just kind of a local phenomenon here.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Now the breeding on your pup, did you say he's from, was it England or?
No,
trying to remember.
No, his father's side is, Norwegian as far back as,
Okay.
6 or 7 generations. You got to go pretty far before you get something that was brought in from anywhere else. His mother is an import from Finland, where they do a lot of hare hunting there, and then they do some hunting with for deer as well.
Okay.
So I know a little bit more about his father than I do about his mother. Just in sort of on paper, I know more about him, but I actually know his mother, and like her a lot. She's a great dog that I have enjoyed. So I've known her for a few years, and I've been toying with the idea of a beagle for quite a while. Basically just based on what good family dogs they are. I grew up with a beagle,
Right.
and could see that the kids weren't connecting the same way with the foxhounds that I did with the beagles, or the beagle we had. We didn't hunt her or anything, but and I wanted that for the kids to have that experience of having that dog that was a little bit more on their level. I could see that the long, 8-hour hunts that I would do with the hounds, the foxhounds, was too much for a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. It wasn't fun for them. They could do it, and they would do it if I asked them to, but I could tell that it was not their deal.
Okay.
And I wanted to back way off. Just same with a pup. I wanted to back off before I kind of killed it for him. So
yeah, I think that size of the beagle, is a big benefit. Just from me being in the house, to just even the pattern of how they run. So
sure,
I think that's why my kids enjoy it so much, because you can be part of the chase, kind of. You can keep up with, for the most part. You can keep up, see what's happening. I do very little looking at my Garmin. That's probably just because I started running before I could afford a Garmin. So
sure,
now
yeah.
but I do have it now, and I use it a lot for stats and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy staying on top of them. I in a big crowd, I enjoy sitting on the tailgate and letting them hear them run. But I run primarily a lot by myself or with my son, and we enjoy. We're judging them as they're running. So
That's really cool. It's cool that you've got that as something that you're sort of a bonding thing for you and your son, who's 13. Is that
yeah,
right?
Brady's 13. My daughter's she's 11 now. So
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
yeah.
my sons one is 7 and one just turned 10 a few days ago.
Okay.
They're and the 10-year-old is really, really into it.
Okay.
So he's really excited about the beagle at this point, because I think that he, if you asked him, he would say, "Oh no, the big hounds are no problem whatsoever for me." But it would be his ego talking more than the pure honesty there, I think. Because we had some, we had some days where like by the end of it, it was like I was way ready to be done myself, and I can't imagine what must have been like for somebody that took twice as many steps as I did to keep up.
That's what I hear. Like a lot of the coon hounds, the podcast I listen to, like just that idea of having to walk a couple miles through the woods to a tree. I don't know if I'm man enough sometimes, but I do want to definitely do it. And not to say there's been a handful of times, where either the dogs bump a fox or, they'll get in a thicket and they'll hit a rabbit on the other side. And, we have a half hour in, but it's rare because, usually they circle, and once they hole up, luckily I had a quick hour and a half this morning, and I think they jumped the rabbit and it ran 50 minutes and went to hole and clipped them up and made it back in time for breakfast before the heat.
That's cool. That's cool. What have you done anything special like to get your kids bought into the whole thing? Like I think sometimes something we houndsmen don't talk enough about is how to get that next generation bought in. How did you get your son? How did you introduce him to the hound?
Both right. Both my kids, I tried to make it as fun as possible. So we have a breakfast on the tailgate. We go to the local gas station. They get as much sugar as they want, when they were young.
Yep.
And we'd have breakfast while the dogs would run. So, I didn't try to push it on them, too much, but I always tried to make it fun and just trying to, gauge when they're not having fun. Maybe an hour's fine, versus I try to do at least 3, but that can be done tomorrow. So I do try to, be cognizant and aware of they're 7 years old, and an hour's a pretty good chunk of time for them. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What did you get them? Do they have their own dogs? Like, do they have any dogs that they sort of look at as a little bit their dogs at this point, or are they still kind of your dog / like the family dogs?
Yeah. So this last litter that we kept out of Sadie, and since that was kind of special, she was our first field champion. It took us, my son and 17 years to get here, but we finally got one. And not that we're a hunter, pleasure runner first, like I enjoy field trials, but it's just something fun to do in the off season. We hunt first, but out of this last litter, we kept 2 females, and I let my son pick one. And then, I kept the other one. So it's been kind of fun to see which one we get started first, and, we can poke at each other there. So that'll be his first dog. So
cool. That's excellent.
Yeah. Right.
That's excellent. Wow. That's really cool. It's the beagles are, they're such great family dogs. It's such an easily accessible dog for a bunch of reasons. It can be difficult to find, big enough tracts of land to run the tall hounds, especially when you start getting into sort of more of the urban areas. It can be hard to find, you end up having to tone dogs off to avoid property boundaries and things like that, which just is kind of negative for everybody involved. The dogs aren't necessarily going to understand why you toned them off. They might walk away with, having learned the wrong lesson from that tone, and it's the beagles are so great just because they're small, they're easily accessible. Nobody's going to be afraid of a beagle running up to them. A big, a pack of hounds can be terrifying to some people.
Right.
But you've got to be a pretty big wuss to be afraid of a beagle, I think.
That's what I've judged, thousands of beagles, ran with thousands over the years. I have yet to see a mean beagle. You know what I mean?
You've still got all your toes. It's like
right. And I think that's why they're crossbreeding beagles on everything to get that temperament. You know what I mean? Like it's
sure.
They're just so laid back.
Oh, they are.
And we do have we have 2 in the house too, and the other 4, they come in and out through my basement, but the 2 are dedicated house dogs. The other ones, just we rotate them in and out. But
that's cool.
That's something that you would not have told me 15 years ago that would even cross my mind. But I think the bird dog, cool. Opened some doors there, and I thought, we'll try it. And I tell you, they do handle a lot better. I'm not saying they're better or worse, but
the ones that have been in the house.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. it's part of my. People look at me like I'm crazy, and I definitely don't think that it's a necessary step, but it's a step that I like to take with every pup that I bring in. Is, I'm not going to let that pup, you know, sleep on the couch. I'm not going to let it sleep in my bed or anything like that. There's got to be boundaries, but at the same time, I want that pup. I want that pup's whole world to be me and doing things together with me, like ideally. So, I'll set up a crate in my bedroom for that pup where they'll spend the first 6 months sleeping next to the bed, which means that I've got to put up with, whining in the middle of the night to go out and snoring. It seems like every pup I've ever had snores like a lumberjack. But I think that it does do something, having them that close to you all the time does do something to their biddability, does do something to that sort of your connection with them and their willingness to have you be the focus to a large enough degree that they're going to be willing to sort of accept corrections without it needing to be necessarily a big deal.
Absolutely, yeah. We crate train all of ours now as well. It's a pain for those first, few weeks, but
It is.
Once they get it, and it's so nice if you're traveling, especially if you're on a hunting trip. They can, they behave. They're in their box. They're not whiny,
Right.
and they feel comfortable. So it's less stress for them when, it is time to run at a field trial or go hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely I can see that as a, big benefit there. And there's nothing wrong. Like keep dogs outside too. Like as long as you're, interacting and they're well fed, well housed, I'm happy. But that's just something we chose to do differently,
Oh, for sure.
from when I started.
Yep.
So we try to incorporate all that into, as part of the training now.
Right. Yep. I think that, there's something to be said for it. The sled dogs, they always lived outside. I never had them inside. Or I would house train them in case, I would house break them, a lot of them, just because, especially if you got a dog that needs a little bit of extra attention, is sick or injured or whatever, it's awfully nice to be able to bring it into the house without it just being total chaos. But they never spent a bunch of time in the house. They never slept in the house, that kind of thing. And I have not regretted changing that with the hounds, that they spend a lot more time in the house than my sled dogs ever did. And realistically, I think if I was ever to get back into sled dogs, which it won't happen, but if I ever was, I would seriously consider doing it a little bit differently, just in terms of you get so much back having that connection with them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That sled dog stuff. I just love dogs in general, but the sled dog stuff is just fascinating, and all the crosses that they do with the Alaskan Husky. I could just read that stuff all day. Like I'm a pedigree junkie, so it doesn't really matter what it is.
Boy.
So
I have not gotten to that point where I am with the hounds yet. I'm still just a pleasure hunter to the point where if the grandparents functioned really well, the parents are good, I'm going to be happy trying them up from that litter. But the sled dogs, I went deep into that stuff. I could point out dogs from different lines just based on how they looked.
Exactly. I know.
It'd be like, what is that dog's father's name? Oh, that's the son of Longbine, who's, and just like I could go back 4 or 5, 6 generations, to the point where people fell out of the conversation really early on, and I would just
right.
prattle along about, the connections that these dogs had, completely oblivious to the fact that nobody was listening to me anymore. But it was just endlessly fascinating to me.
Right, and you'll find certain guys that are as dedicated. Like even some of my mentors, that they're not like it doesn't mean much to. It means much to them, but they'd have to look at a pedigree to follow it.
Sure.
Where some people just pick up on it, and it is fun, as you said. I'm sure where you're at with your sled dogs. Like when I'm hunting with dogs, like I've seen 5 or 6 generations, run, and just those qualities that come through over that. That's just, it's so neat to see.
Well, the genetic aspect is something that is absolutely it's funny. I sometimes feel like the genetic aspect of things is completely overrated in the sense that, of course, it's important, but the training, the overall daily care, like that's going to be more important ultimately, I believe. However, I don't think you can underestimate how important the genetics are. It's like it's one of those sort of catch-22s where, you know, if you don't have the genetics, the best care, the best training, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you do have the genetics and not the care and the training, you're not going to get anywhere either. I've seen some superbly bred dogs that, could barely stand up.
Right, right.
So,
And like to get in the whole line breeding thing, like we do try to do we do line breeding, but it's not very close. Nothing against doing close line breeding. I just haven't had to do it, But I've seen one-off breedings of complete outcrosses that burn up the trial circuit, and they're hard going hunting dogs. And I've
yeah,
seen line bred dogs. And I think in the beagle world, there's so many good bloodlines right now.
yeah,
And a lot of them are comparable. A lot of them have a lot of the same qualities. So a lot of the foundation's different, but the characteristics that are coming through are very similar.
sure.
So you can cross in and out and kind of, get what you're looking for out of that cross. So I think
Right.
that's just where we're at, even over the short 15, 20 years that I've been into it, I've seen the quality of dog just has really gotten better. And
That's the truth. Yeah. I think in pretty
or-
much every arena, that's been my experience. The quality of your average starting border collie in these trials is just flabbergasting to me, compared to what it was 25 years ago. And the same with the sled dogs. The quality of your average sled dog now, is there's no comparison. I have a full kennel of dogs that where every single one of those dogs is a higher quality dog than my best dogs were, 20 years ago. It's such an interesting. I think in some ways that's been one of the benefits of social media and the internet and sort of ease of access to information, that you kind of got those. You're able to see those results. You're able to see, the pedigrees and things like that instantly, and are able to really follow and really kind of flesh out your knowledge of a line and the knowledge of a specific dog really, really effectively in a way that I think it was very difficult to do in the past.
right. For sure. And another thing that I've learned, and I don't consider myself a big trialer. I probably judge more than I trial, just
Mhm.
because the demand, it takes a lot to get a dog in shape at that level. And, with working and everything,
Mhm.
it's hard to have a dog at the top all the time. But
Sure.
just, with that COVID and working from home, we had some extra time, to really focus on finishing a dog. And what separates a good dog from a great dog, isn't very much, is what I've learned.
It's true.
It comes down to conditioning. It comes down to diet,
Mhm.
the routine. Like it's like anything else, like when you get into something, you can learn that first 80% of something pretty quick. It's
Oh,
that
yeah.
last 20% that is going to take you forever.
Oh,
And
you'll spend the
you'll
rest
never
of your
figure it
life.
out.
Yeah, you'll spend the rest of your life working on that last little bit. And I mean, that's what I find. I'm really looking forward to getting to that point with the hounds, because that's where I was with the huskies, where
Yeah,
I
that's
had,
super interesting, right?
it's so interesting. I loved getting to that fine tuning point of view. I knew how to hook up a team. I knew how to feed them. I knew how to train them. To that sort of superficial, yes, I'm capable of doing these things. But that fine tuning, man, that got interesting. That got so interesting. And I'm really looking forward to getting to that point with the hounds, which I'm not even close to at this point. Just kind of, I'm still learning that sort of 80% sort of basic, painting with a broad brush.
Right, but you'll bring a whole new perspective, and that might change. With your background, that's
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot
that
of a different.
crossover.
Yeah, and that actually has been really interesting. Is that I I gained a lot very cheaply based on my experience with the sled dogs. So I had issues that some of my friends who were very experienced houndsmen were having. I have not had, because I've been able to avoid some of the mistakes that they have made based off of my experience with the sled dogs. For example, conditioning, how to really condition a dog to be ready to do those, you know, big long hunts that are going to, drag out over multiple days, that kind of a thing, without having that dog come back and be so tired that it won't eat, or so tired that it won't drink, or, with its feet roughed up or something like that. That's not been a problem for me, because it was all we thought about with the sled dogs. It's the, what do we need to do to give this dog the ability to keep doing this day after day after day after day. And, some of it was breeding, certainly, but a lot of it was just how we took care of them and how we conditioned them, which I've applied to the hounds. And that made my life much, much easier. But then, there are some very basic things that it seems like the houndsmen have a really, sort of innate sense that, the mushing people don't, like the dog mushers don't necessarily, or not all. At least I'll speak for myself. I don't. That
Right.
ability to, what I respect with the houndsman is just that ability to kind of let go. Just sort of that release, that moment of release. With the sled dogs, you're always tied to them. Basically, they're always
Good
attached to you.
point.
You're in control, and you can look on a map and just trace out where you're going to go, and that's where you're going to go. There's no, and even if you lose them, they're going to still be on the trail. It's not like they're going to break off of a well-groomed trail and start busting off into the loose snow by themselves. It's just not going to happen. But with that was the hardest adjustment for me, was taking that step from always being in total control of my dogs to being willing to just, like, I remember the first time I was going to let that buzz dog go, or the Virpi dog go even. It's just this moment of like, this feels so wrong, because you would never ever do it with a husky. You would never ever do it with a sled dog. Just like drop them out of the truck, point them in the direction you wanted them to go, and let them go. It's like this. That would be insane.
I remember when my wife and I were dating, and she was like, how are you going to get them all back? This was even before I had bells in their collars.
Right.
My ears ringed at work for years, from those bells. I heard them nonstop.
Right.
But it's organized chaos. It's like, nope, we'll get them back. It's just that repetition, and just, I guess, getting a comfort level with it. And that was for me, casting those. I remember that first hunting year with the gray dog and Daisy, and that fear of losing them, and but you get smart over the years. I try to hunt big tracts of land. I love big tracts, so
Yep.
I don't like, if I don't have to, I won't run a little pocket of 10 acres, unless somebody wants to see the dog work, or somebody, a landowner wants to see it. But I like getting out in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
No roads. The only thing I might have to worry about is a porcupine or something like that. But
Right.
past that, it's just that release, and that stress level goes way down. And with the Garmin's now, it's just that security blanket.
Sure. Yeah, it makes such a huge difference. It really does. The Garmin's, it's a sort of, still strikes me as this sort of miraculous thing. And I have no experience from, it's not like I was running hounds before, before the Garmin's were available, but it's just like, just seeing the difference, the evolution from, I had like the original, what were they, like the DC-30s?
Oh, the big one, right? Yeah. So we
Yeah,
run
like,
minis.
yeah, like I had the big old ones that, and even that seemed miraculous to me. But now, all of the bells and whistles, it's just amazing to me. It's unbelievable.
Right.
It's
That
and it's like in a good and a bad way. It's like it's miraculous to me, but at the same time, it's a little bit like spending a little bit too much time looking at the screen.
Well, that's what I don't look at my receiver. I have it connects to my watch, so I just see arrows, so I can see. So I try never to. I only look at that receiver for stats, just because where I'm running there are no roads unless I hit like a fox sometimes or something like that. So
Right.
that's kind of. But I think because I wasn't used to it before, and you do some club running too. The only time you're looking for it when the rabbit goes in a hole, you have that security of a fence too at times. So
Right.
that just
Right.
changes
No, that
that.
makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, for me here, I'm right up against a national park,
Okay.
and I'm allowed to hunt in there. It's a public land. It's public land, but where I am, I have good road access. But I know that there's a certain point that if they cross that road, a specific road, if they cross that road, it's going to be 150 miles before I'm able to get to another road to cut them off. They're gone. And with the beagles, I'm not as worried about it. But like with the plot, he did that to me. He ditched over that road when I didn't expect him to, and he was gone for days,
Wow.
days and days. I never ever thought I was going to get him back. And then the Garmin was just an absolute godsend. Most of the time with some of these other hounds, like if I look at the hunt again afterwards, it's like, would I have needed the Garmin during that hunt? Probably not. But it's that one out of every 30 times where you're
Right.
just so glad you got it.
Right.
So, well, what's the future for you? Like, what's your plans? What are your goals? What do you got coming up?
So kind of learning from my not mistakes, but my shortcomings with Daisy. I'm trying to be smart about a breeding program.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really using Sadie as more of the foundation, and she's actually a mixture of that old Nip Otis blood in her, like not from Daisy directly, but it's some similar blood from
Mm-hmm.
behind her with some what we call Flat Creek lines. Really being
Okay.
smart about lining up some males for to get some pups and get a good base. She has kind of what everything that I'm looking for. Like if you were described, what I was looking for, she's pretty close to it. So I know I got what I want. She's got crazy hunt and desire, but most of all, she has the brains. And it comes
Right.
down to, if they don't have the brains, they can have hunt and desire, they can have line control, but she's got the brains, she's got the hunt, she's got the control, and she has pretty good conformation. She's a kind of a feisty looking little thing. She doesn't, my wife thinks she looks like a terrier, but
Okay.
trying to add some conformation into it, but she's like kind of light boned and, but that really, she has that quality of the longer she runs, the harder she runs, the better she gets. And
Sure.
that's hard to get. I haven't had many that are like that.
That's a good quality.
And it's a fun one too, because they react very well to situations, going into certain things. So,
Sure. Is there like on the trialing thing a little bit again? Is there any kind of requirement for bench shows?
The AKC, there is bench trial shows. They have options to do field. There's a field and a show side.
Yep.
There, I guess I don't have enough background on knowing if there's not like a show title for that piece of it. It's just a field piece. There is this complete separate AKC show champion events.
Yep.
That, we just certain trials that they will choose to have a show, and and sometimes we'll do like a grand final winner. So it would be a total of the combined points in the field. And then, if the dog plays second in the field, first in the show, it might have enough points to be the grand final winner.
Sure.
It is something that I'm really trying to focus on, because conformation, I think I'd like to see my dogs be a little better.
Okay.
And I'd like to have size in them too. So actually the male I sent you a video of, he's kind of a completely separate little bit of blood that I'm trying to introduce into the kennel.
Yeah. Okay. So is he one of yours, a male you've brought in to your kennel?
He is one of mine. Yeah. So over the years, I'll bring a male in from the outside, and I like to see his mannerisms. I don't know. I enjoy seeing, just not breeding to a dog, but knowing kind of its background and everything, and how it, is he whiny in the kennel, little things like that would kind of steer me away.
Sure. Would you then breed to that specific dog, or would you use that dog as sort of a measuring stick for that line?
So that's my plan. Is I want to run him till the male that I'm talking about. I want to run him to see how he finishes out till around maybe 2 years old,
Okay. Yep.
and then I have 3 females right now that I would consider to breed to him.
Okay.
That I'm just kind of thinking about, and then it'll be an outcross, but then hopefully I could bring it back into some of my other line.
Yep. Yep. That's really interesting. Wow.
And he's from an interesting kennel. The guy's been breeding for 40 years, and he actually crosses show champions in with he blends them on field champions, and he's done these out crosses, and it's just really cool. And he's big on the breeding side and the pedigree, and you can look back, like when you see his dogs, it's just all his kennel the whole way back, and
cool.
it's like it's a history lesson. It's really neat.
That's really cool. I love guys like that. There's not many of them left anymore, unfortunately.
And he has it's beautiful setup. It's neat. So the male, he's has a little more drive than my dogs have. When I say drive, I mean like speed. Like he's not as close, but he can carry the line for a long time. So there's like a balancing act there.
Sure.
I guess that's my breeding program. I'm trying not to focus on one thing as much, but I'm trying to bring. All comes back to balance, right? So that's what I'm trying to, not get too focused on one area, but maintain the qualities, that are important to me, and to have a pack that works together as well.
Sure. Oh, that sounds good, man. I wish you the best of luck with that. It's exciting. It's you're at that point of fine tuning stuff that I find so interesting. That's exciting stuff. That is exciting.
Oh, thank you.
Stuff.
I know I got a ways to go too, and just based on a lot of my mentors. But it is funny. They're not funny, but more fun. Just to get to that point where it's environmental, it's conditional. All these different factors that go into the success of a dog, and it's just the fun to tune that piece of it.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense. Well, that's exciting. Well, we're approaching an hour and a half here, so I think we might call it an evening. But it was very, very cool to talk to you, Brian. I really appreciate you coming on, especially on relatively short notice here.
Oh no, I appreciate it, Bear. Thank you for having me, and always fun. Happy to talk beagles. So.
Yeah, anytime. It's always fun to talk beagles, and let's touch base again when you've done your breeding. I'd be really interested to hear what those pups, what that male turns into and stuff like that.
Yeah, certainly.
What he finishes into.
Will do.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Man, I love that sound.